Okay, welcome back. Unfortunately, I don't have the paper-based version of this question for this video, so I'm going to have to rely on the laptop here. There was one part that we had left to do in the 1999 marginal costing question 8 from the Leaving Cert paper, and it was the number of units, it's part E here, the number of units that must be sold at €11 per unit to provide a profit of 10% of the sales revenue received from these same units. So I use the same method each time they ask us to find the number of units that will provide a profit of a certain percentage of sales. So whenever you see that language, I use a particular method. Now the method involves using a per unit marginal costing statement for a start. So your per unit marginal costing statement, this is part E. That looks like a D, that's part E. Well, let's just get rid of that. Part E. It starts the same as a usual mini costing statement. Sales minus variable cost gives you the contribution minus the fixed cost gives you the profit. Okay, so then we put in our information, but all our information here, instead of going to be in hundreds of thousands of euros, it's going to be per unit, so it's going to be in tens of euros at the most. So again, what does it say to us? It says find the number of units that must be sold at €11 per unit. So the selling price is €11 per unit. So that's the first thing. If this is per unit, then our sales for 1 unit is €11. Okay. The next thing, if we go back to the question again, it says must be sold at €11 per unit to provide a profit of 10% of the sales revenue. So if the profit is going to be 10% of the sales revenue, so for 1 unit, that would mean that the profit would be 10% of €11. And so if we get 10% of €11, and this is how I'm inclined to do it, multiplied by 0.1, that comes to €1.10. And so we can fill in our little mini per unit costing statement, we can fill in the bottom part, €1.10. That's 2 parts filled in so far. So next we're going to look at what else, if there's any other changes. So number of units that must be sold at €11 per unit to provide a profit of 10% of the sales revenue received from these units. So nothing else changed there. Now, here's where we need to go back just to point one thing out. So the next thing we're going to look at is the variable cost per unit. In this case, if we look back at our original marginal costing statement, the variable cost per unit was 620, and normally we'd need to see if this needs to change. But since in part E they say the selling price is €11, which is the very same as this selling price here, then it doesn't matter that we have a percentage sales commission, because if the selling price isn't changing, the marginal or the variable cost per unit isn't changing either. So we can take that 620 here. But warning, this is perhaps a bad example to take, because ordinarily I would imagine in most cases they will give you a different selling price here, and then this will have to change in the same way that it changed for the other parts that we were doing previously. So if I subtract this 620, I get 480. That's my contribution. And now, if I've got a contribution of 480 and I take the fixed cost per unit from it and get a profit of 110, well, that means this has got to be 370. And how we would get it is if we took the 110 from the 480, it will give us this 370 figure here. Okay, so after we get the fixed cost per unit, there's just one more step to do then. You take the complete or the total fixed costs, which are 254,000 from the original marginal costing statement. So 254,000. And you divide that by the fixed cost per unit, which is 370. So what we're saying is, if this is the fixed cost for every unit that we sell, and this is the total amount of fixed costs for all the units we sell, then if I divide the fixed cost for 1 unit into the total amount of fixed costs, then my answer should be the number of units that we sell. And remember, the question was, if I just go back here to the question again, the question was, what are the number of units that must be sold at 11 euros per unit to provide that profit of 10%? So back here again, if I divide this 370 by 254, well, you know what? I don't have a calculator with me, so I'm just going to look up the answer here. According to this, it's 68,649. 68,649, and the same rule applies when you're rounding, because you will almost every time have to round. Always round up, so not mathematically, just up every single time. So one more recap on how we did this. They'll normally give you the selling price. From that, they say that the profit is a certain percentage of it, so you get the percentage of the profit, percentage of sales rather, and put it down as profit. Next, I would put in the variable cost per unit, and normally you will have to change this from what it was originally if the sales price originally has changed as well, and if there is a percentage sales commission. From that, we can work out the contribution, and once we have the contribution and the profit, we can work out the fixed cost. And the last step, and very important not to leave it out, once we have that fixed cost per unit, we want to divide it into the total amount of the fixed costs to get the number of units that we would need to sell.